First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't generate amusing holiday cards, but it will personalize career paths for your people and let you know which suppliers are best, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
I'm Yasmin Gagne.
I'm Josh Christensen.
And this is Most Innovative Companies. On today's episode, Fast Company executive editor Amy Farley.
There's a real power in human connectivity, and I think we're feeling it even more so with the emergence of AI.
Senior staff editor Jeff Beard talks with Taco Bell CEO Sean Tresvant and CMO Taylor Montgomery.
We have the best fans in the world that love the brand more than Sean and I ever will. We love the brand a lot.
And as always, keeping tabs.
The unions want to draw a hard line in using those AI models in terms of basically on the grounds of name, image, and likeness.
But first, here's the download. The news you need to know this week in the world of business and innovation.
Unilever has announced plans to spin off its ice cream unit, which in terms of units is my favorite. This unit includes iconic brands like Ben & Jerry's and Magnum. The restructuring is projected to save approximately $868 million over the next 3 years. In unrelated kind of news, though, the company also announced it's laying off 7,500 people globally.
Brutal. Tough break for the mustard crew.
Yeah.
Or whatever else Unilever makes.
What don't they make, honestly?
So Spotify paid out $9 billion in streaming royalties last year, according to its loud and clear report about the economics of music streaming. The company's been on a charm offensive over the past few months, hitting back at criticism that it doesn't pay artists fairly for their work. That criticism is fair.
Also, this is not nearly as important as paying artists fairly, which you should absolutely do. Loud and clear report? We'd take one or two more cracks at that name.
Do we get any royalties from our podcast?
No.
Yeah, well, look, the company sees them, but not us.
We don't do programmatic ads with Spotify, so they're not paying us. We pay for them because we host on Megaphone. But loud and clear, I'm tired of sound puns.
It's true.
In the audio industry.
It's true.
Next story. Roblox, who previously offered a fund for game makers and designers, is now expanding that fund. In good financial news, it's expanding to $35 million and will encompass developer studios and users who want to build things beyond games on the server. And one of the first partners is a short-form video service nudging into the social media landscape called TalkTick. It's not called that, but it is probably a good time to create your short-form video platform in lieu of the potential TikTok ban.
Speaking of short-form videos...
Great transition, Yaz.
You know it. YouTube is adding a feature for creators to label videos that contain AI-generated or synthetic content. The labeling tool is basically just a checkbox that appears in the uploading and posting process. They're asking creators to disclose altered or synthetic content that seems realistic. Not included in that criteria is basically beauty filters and special effects like background blurs.
I thought you were going to say not included in that is the Kate Middleton Photoshop photo, because that did not seem realistic.
That was not real at all. I'm still convinced that woman is dead.
My God. I hope not. That would be sad from just like a person
a human
standpoint,
perspective.
But I don't know what the fuck's
but
going
also,
on with the royal
let's be
family.
honest. Also, the enforcement of the tool relies on the honor system. So how much of a difference is this going to make?
So basically just nerds and teachers' pets will be adding that in.
Yeah, huge losers.
Huge losers marking their videos.
Watch when our podcast.
And hopefully news organizations.
When our podcast moves to video, we're never checking that box.
I will probably check that box because I am a nerd at the teacher's pet. And finally, Microsoft has hired DeepMind co-founder Mustafa Suleyman to head a new consumer AI organization. Suleyman will be CEO of the unit called Microsoft AI. Super clever. This move consolidates Microsoft's consumer AI efforts, bringing together Copilot chatbot and the new Bing browser that uses AI.
Listen, I'm really happy they just went with Microsoft AI because historically their naming
naming is not great.
Bing,
honestly, underrated, just a utilitarian name.
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
true.
Bing always makes me giggle.
Who uses that? My father uses that.
Yeah.
And that's the news you need to know today. Josh, have you ever had an idea for a company?
I have had ideas for a company. I'm not going to reveal them here because someone will steal it. No, I think I've had some terrible ideas for the company in the past. I do always think about, what kind of podcast company I would start, which I think we have enough of those at
that's
this
pretty.
point.
Well, that's also like that one makes sense,
Yeah, I mean, I do this for a living. This isn't a company that I've started, but I've talked to one of our colleagues on Inc. magazine over there, Diana Ransom, who hosts one of our podcasts, told a story about how her and her husband almost started a bone broth company and got all the equipment, made a bunch of bone broth, and then decided, no, we just want
awesome.
We just want this. We just like bone broth. We don't need to make a
bone
company.
broth is really good, in fairness.
Yeah, I love bone broth. Big fan of pho. That's all me. Have you ever thought about a company idea?
Not really, because I'm not smart enough, but I will say my friend Josh, the other Josh in my life, did come up with two quite compelling ones, and they're both food related.
Nice.
The first is making falafels in a waffle maker, the falafel.
Oh, that's a great idea. I would have a falafel.
Yeah, 100%.
Falafel?
Falafel. And then you put, you drizzle tahini on it and put salad
or
on it.
you could use that as to make a sandwich.
To wrap,
Yeah.
So the falafel, I know.
A layer in a burger. Yeah.
Honestly,
great idea.
Very good idea. His other idea that I do find compelling.
But also you can just use a waffle iron for that. You don't need a specific.
Literally, we still go out and buy random shit that we could make at home, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's nice. Yeah, dupes is a thing.
Yeah, dupes is a thing. And then the other one that my husband thinks is gross, but I think is actually a decent idea is hot ice cream.
Deep fried ice cream's a thing.
No, but what if you ate it with a spoon and it was warm?
So you...
it would be hot cream.
Yeah, it's just that's disgusting.
I feel like it could be good.
I mean, you're basically talking about what if we made sweet bisques and sold them? That's essentially what we're talking about.
When you put it that way, it sounds really horrible.
It does. Yeah, it does sound horrible. And this is why most businesses fail. But not the companies we're talking about today, because our most innovative companies list is out.
It's true, and here to talk about it is Amy Farley, who oversaw the whole issue. She's going to tell us about some of the trends we're seeing this year. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Yaz and Josh.
How are you celebrating this release?
I'm celebrating by going to South by Southwest right before the launch of MIC.
So working weekend, yeah.
For the working weekend.
We're recording this a little earlier before the list comes out because of South by and because of the crazy deadline that is this immense monumental package. And we'll get all into it.
So I want to talk about some of the trends you've been seeing this year. And to start off, we have a package about kind of live mass experiences. Live mass experiences that lead to human connection, not live mass experiences Roblox. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, this should come to a surprise only to the three people that were living under a rock last year. But, it was the year of Taylor Swift and Beyonce's mega concerts. And obviously, those were big cultural touchstones and amazing experiences if you were lucky enough to see them in person. But then you got to re-experience them or experience them for the first time in movie theaters, which brought out droves of people dressed to the nines to, celebrate and experience it together. I brought my 11-year-old daughter to see the Taylor Swift movie, and I was a skeptic and came away with a wristful of friendship bracelets and a Converse. So they were really powerful.
Did she make friendship bracelets?
You want to know the truth?
Yeah.
That was me. It was me the afternoon of.
That's so awesome.
She's such a little CEO in the making. She's sitting at the table, barely doing them, and I was working away. But anyway, there was that. But then beyond that, we also saw the emergence of Sphere in Las Vegas, the enormous tech-savvy, tech-forward concert and then some venue, which really brings people together. And it's infused with technology, but it really is about people sitting cheek by jowl and having this immersive experience together. And when we looked at these trends, we saw this sort of larger idea, which is that human beings really wanted to get together in person and experience a cultural phenomenon together. And I think that sort of mass experience is something, obviously we see that in the sporting world, and the Super Bowl was more evidence of this. There's a real power in human connectivity, and I think we're feeling it even more so with the emergence of AI. This isn't just about sort of the COVID feeling of isolation, but I think this is something where we are seeking to sort of feel just rejuvenated by being with other human beings and all thinking and liking the same thing together. Like, we are in such a divisive time. Like, it's very cool to be surrounded by a whole bunch of people that all think Beyonce is just the most amazing human being. So, and that's cool. I mean, the Beyonce movie was amazing.
We also have to talk about the fact that those two concerts, Taylor Swift and Beyonce, generated, I think like more than the average country has. They have been like wildly successful.
Didn't like the Eras tour when it went to Denmark literally affect the GDP of Denmark? Is that apocryphal or is that real?
Well, not to get too far ahead of myself, but not quite as much as one Novo Nordisk pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
But no, we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the things we wrote about for both Taylor and Beyonce. For Beyonce, we actually specifically put Beyonce in Most Innovative Companies as sort of the top fashion company of the year, because Beyonce at every concert was wearing these custom designer outfits that were just extraordinary. They lit up on social media. They on the big screen in the movie theater. I mean, people literally were gasping when she showed up in certain outfits, and they edited it together to sort of highlight all of these different outfit changes. And we actually tracked the financial impact on the designers. I mean, they saw sellout rates increasing. They got tons of, media value from just the social media shares of these outfits. So Beyonce was arguably the most powerful force in the fashion industry last year for her, for turning her concert into a runway. And then you have Taylor Swift, who crafted this like groundbreaking deal to cut out the middlemen to distribute her movie directly to AMC theaters. And that brought in not as much as the tour itself, but so much money, $250 million by the end of the year in global receipts. And without the middlemen taking a big cut of that, like a lot of that's going to Taylor. So Beyonce and Taylor, they weren't just about the concerts and the music, but they were, spinning the tops for a lot of different industries with these tours.
And it's worth saying, the Sphere itself cost $2.3 billion to make. Companies are still investing in all this stuff. I will say with the Sphere, I have to mention, I think the funniest joke about it, which is the conspiracy theory that U2 is just trapped there because they performed from there at the Grammys.
Oh my God.
The Sphere is really interesting. I mean, they had to reach out to so many different tech companies to get them to build tech that's custom for the Sphere, because something like this had never been done before. So that was really fascinating to watch. I think the big question is, what other city on this planet wants a Sphere? I mean, it is so thrilling,
totally.
So exciting. It's a huge draw for tourists, but also like, my God, trying to fall asleep at night with that glowing in the background, is not something that anything but a Vegas tourist would really put up with. So I think what's going to be really interesting for Sphere is seeing where it goes next, if anywhere, because it's already been shut out of London. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, London doesn't seem right. I feel like Dubai or something like
yeah,
that.
it does
Macau.
have Dubai vibes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Casino centers feel like the right place for it.
I just want to see one pop up in like the most random place, like Omaha, Nebraska, and see what
Warren Buffett, secret investor. He's super into it. I don't know. Maybe Niagara, they'll put it up by the Niagara Falls.
Now, the second biggest trend we saw was basically really futuristic technology that is sort of here all of a sudden. Tell me about that.
I've been at Fast Company now for several years, 8 years. And there have been a lot of technologies that we've been writing about since I got to Fast Company, and sort of like waiting eagerly for it to show up. And I'm not even talking about generative AI here. And one of the most prominent ones is CRISPR. This idea that you could edit genes and create therapeutics from it is, transformative, but it has also sort of felt just out of reach. And in December, Vertex Pharmaceuticals got FDA approval for a CRISPR-based treatment for sickle cell disease, which is amazing, because to that point, the only treatment was stem cell implant. Like, it was only available to a small swath of people who had sickle cell disease. Everybody else just had to look for solutions to mitigate the effects of sickle cell, but couldn't find a cure. And here you have this ability to edit genes, to go in and basically get blood oxygen levels back to a normal place. So it effectively cures people. It's really extraordinary.
I want to say the first time I kind of really knew about CRISPR was probably in 2017 when Radiolab had an episode on it. And specifically they talked about, we think that this can be a breakthrough treatment for sickle cell immediately. And that was 7 years ago now. And then it's finally come through is wild. Yeah, CRISPR's been kind of on the cusp of everything. But also, just quick side note, every time someone says editing genes, I picture people bedazzling actual blue jeans, which was a trend for all of us millennials out there.
Oh, yeah.
The little designs on the jeans.
I actually was laughing at the fact that you were explaining sickle cell anemia and the current treatment for it. Me and Josh were going, yeah, we know anything about this topic.
I listened to that Radiolab episode.
I know what you're talking about. There's also a large drone delivery company called Zipline that we put on the list, right?
Yeah, well, Zipline's interesting, and we've written about them over the years. They really earn their reputation by delivering medical supplies across rural areas of Africa. And, what they figured out there is extraordinary, but also they were working across areas of Africa that are very not densely populated, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Zipline is here in the U.S., and it just received, or last year it received FAA approval to deliver packages commercially. And this is the key detail, beyond the visual line of sight, which basically means that up until this point, humans had to be on the ground watching a drone fly, and they always had to be able to see it. Not me, because I have terrible eyesight, but presumably somebody with better eyesight. Now these drones can fly beyond human sight. And they can deliver packages in suburban, even urbanish areas. They have a new model for their drone that actually sort of flies and hovers above an area and drops like a little mini droid down on a wire to deliver the package down to the ground, and then zips it back up and flies away. They're working with companies like Walmart, Sweet Green, so you can expect to see...
Of course they're working with Sweet Green. I'll believe it when I see it, guys. They're always announcing random shit, and I'm like, does any of this make sense?
In 20 minutes, you are going to get a shrumani salad delivered to your apartment, yes. From me via Sweet Green, or via Zipline. No, they're coming. I mean, I think not to New York, unfortunately, but in Texas, I think you will start seeing these things, and humans are going to have to get comfortable with the idea of these drones flying around and dropping packages.
There's a couple more sort of futuristic tech ones in the same vein in that they're not medical, but kinetics is one that we put on the list, and so is Climework. Tell me about both of those.
There's this sort of idea of these sci-fi-ish things that are happening that just... when you stop and think about it, just feel outlandish. In the same way as we're editing a gene and inserting it in a human body to address a horrible illness. Kinetics is basically a company that helps spacecrafts navigate very, very far away from Earth. And they helped NASA travel 4.4 billion miles out to find an asteroid in the deep space, to land on it, collect samples, and then bring them back down to Earth. I mean, that is just something that feels like you're going to see on a sci-fi show, not happening here and now.
That sounds like something, a writer who knows nothing about science would make up. Like if you tasked me with writing a sci-fi show.
That's kind of a realistic thing, though. People, there's sort of a feedback loop between sci-fi and tech startups now. I mean, we just talked a couple weeks ago on our news segment about Figure and their deal with OpenAI and ChatGPT about these silver-plated robots that are straight out of iRobot that we talked about.
2003 Will Smith vehicle iRobot that we referenced.
But there's so many things. CRISPR is just kind of a little bit inspired by Gattaca. Not it's because it's a gene, it's a different thing. But it's a little bit these things are sort of self-fulfilling prophecies in a way. And all of the people who created this technology, especially in the early days, talk about this in Computer Freaks, which I produce. Go listen to Computer Freaks, another shameless plug. But all these guys were sci-fi nerds who were like, I want to make stuff that I see in sci-fi. And then they made stuff or talked about stuff. It ended up in sci-fi. It gets made. It's all a feedback loop.
Right.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Let's talk about Climeworks. That's a terrestrial invention.
When I'm trying to think about like what sci-fi novel like predicted this, which is like direct air capture technology, which is like literally sucking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and burying it underground. Climeworks is a company that's has the largest direct air capture plant. So Climeworks makes machines that can pull carbon dioxide out of the air and bury it underground. Obviously, that is a crazy concept, and it's one that we really do need to commercialize in order to prevent the effects of climate change. I mean, there's a lot of different solutions that we have to pursue, but one of them is trying to get the carbon dioxide that's already out there out of the atmosphere.
There's no consequences to doing that?
No, I mean, this isn't like...
My only point of comparison, I'll be honest, is there was an influencer who was selling her farts in a jar, and she eventually got ill from doing that.
I feel like this is a very, very different thing. That was because of the diet she was eating to collect it. Direct carbon capture is a different thing. Like, didn't like Bill Gates and Microsoft pledge like X billion dollars to like carbon technology companies and stuff like that? I'm very excited about this. I used to cover a lot of this at WNYC when I was at the Takeaway there, about like talking about like, when's climate capture coming? Is this a thing? How is it feasible? And like, so this is very exciting.
I mean, yes, I think there's like maybe less exciting, but, you know, still consequential, maybe negative impacts of this. And that would be, and I think that, you know, it's still very expensive to do. And Climeworks still hasn't brought down the price so that it is like a huge scalable solution. And so I think some of the critique is there too much money going into direct air capture? Will it be able to, you know, to scale fast enough so that the price actually makes sense? Right now, Climeworks does have customers that are buying its, you know, sequestered carbon, basically. But it's still costly. So, you know, I guess the question is like, should we be pursuing this technology over another? And I think the answer is we should be pursuing all of them because we are in dire straits. So
that makes a lot of sense. Now, the top three on the list were fairly predictable, I would say. It's Nvidia, Novo Nordisk, and Microsoft. I want to hear the reasoning for why they ended up in the top three.
Nvidia is our number one company, and that's not all that surprising considering the company's growth over the past year. Harry McCracken, who's our global tech editor who covered Nvidia for us, really looked at not just its chip prowess, because its chips are really powering the generative AI revolution that's happening right now. Even competitors of Nvidia that want to make their own chips or are pursuing their own chips are still using Nvidia's chips. Like startups, universities, massive companies, they're all using Nvidia's chips. I think what's less talked about is that Nvidia has also been working really closely with partners in different industries to create AI applications and AI platforms on top of its chips. So it's not just like creating the hardware that's powering the AI revolution, but it's also creating a lot of the platforms and applications for it, for, you know, industries as varied as automaking and retail. So I think that's what puts Nvidia in a really powerful position right now in AI. That and the fact that like its revenue surged 126% last year, and now it is right now the third most valuable company on the planet, right behind Microsoft and Apple. So that's just kind of undeniable. So that's Nvidia. Novo Nordisk, that's the good old Ozempic and Wegovy maker, which I know you guys have talked about and you're familiar with.
I do have a story with this, and this is a little bit, and maybe this is too much to share.
No.
I'm sorry to take away from you.
No.
So I had my annual doctor's physical the other day. Spoiler alert, my cholesterol and my triglycerides are a little high, and I'm a little heavier than I want to do. I found out that I technically am obese in my analysis, and my doctor had a talk with me about, do I want to try Wegovy?
Are you going to do it?
Wow.
I'm not going to do it. Okay, so you've seen me. I don't
do it for the content. Our listeners would love to know.
I do want to say something to listeners that like I have a very hard time believing that you are technically obese. I will defer to your doctor.
Oh, me too.
Like,
I know.
That is shocking to me.
For the record, that seems crazy. You're also just like really tall.
I am a very tall, broad
You're like,
person.
you know, yeah.
But technically my BMI is 32. But overall, we had this conversation, and like we've talked about it a lot, but I've never really talked about it in relationship to myself a lot. So like going through and actually talking about things, I'm not going to do it because there are some like loose ties to thyroid cancer. with that. And I've had cancer before in my life already, and I've had family members with specifically thyroid cancer. So I was like, no, that's a hard line for me personally. Now, that's not like a huge risk factor, but like given my family history and personal history, it's just not something I'm going to do. It was an interesting experience to actually talk about this with a doctor and the potential gains and risks. And my doctor wasn't like pushing it on me or anything, but we were like, this is an option that's out there and we can talk about it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Super interesting. For Novo Nordisk, it's similar to Nvidia. Like, it's known for one thing, but I think what's really exciting about Novo Nordisk and what it's done with semaglutide, which is that sort of the drug behind the drugs, is that there's a range of different applications and they're still discovering them. Novo Nordisk is putting a lot of research into different applications for semaglutide and GLP-1s. But researchers are looking into everything from how they can help prevent Alzheimer's and dementia. They can help with kidney disease. Novo Nordisk is very close to getting FDA approval for cardiac applications for Wegovy. So it's going to be very interesting. I think like we have not heard the end of semaglutides and GLP-1s, and it's not just about weight loss, although that's obviously really buzzy and it's a huge market. A lot of doctors that may not be fully comfortable prescribing these medications just for somebody's weight. If they say like, but it's also good for their heart and their kidney. Like, so then, I'll really try to get this medication to you. And they're also working on different ways to get it to you, because right now it's an injectable, which is tougher to swallow, if you will, for some people. And if they can deliver it to you in pill form, then that really unlocks so many more patients too.
Now, the last one was Microsoft, which obviously we know Microsoft's involvement in OpenAI.
And its involvement in getting Sam back to OpenAI.
Yeah, exactly. Getting Sam back to OpenAI.
Oh, that fateful day in November.
So I'm guessing it's on the list because of its AI investments and work in AI, but tell us more.
Well, I think if you think about chatbots and generative AI, I mean, obviously Microsoft's investment in OpenAI has been huge. I joke, but like bringing Sam back and getting stability back to OpenAI over that crucial weekend. I don't know exactly what happened in that boardroom, but that was a monumental moment for Microsoft. Let's not like diminish that in any way. But also, like when you think about chatbot and AI tools, some people are using ChatGPT all the time. But I think for regular people who are not kind of on the front lines of adoption of things, it's Microsoft that's really, and Microsoft's Office products that are really going to be one of their most profound, and already are one of their most profound interactions with these chatbots, because Microsoft has been incorporating them in this co-pilot way, which is basically like a little AI assistant to help you navigate Excel and help you with your Word documents and do all this other sort of Office-related tasks. And I think that's getting people very comfortable with this idea of AI assistants, and that'll filter into, other ways. So Microsoft for really popularizing and getting these tools into our hands quickly.
Honestly, guys, fix SharePoint.
This is more of a personal office worker.
This is a personal gripe. Like, fuck AI. Just make your SharePoint work.
I have no comment on the SharePoint situation.
Make your line edit UI more visually accessible. That is actually a very real note. It is not visually accessible at all.
That's really interesting, because Microsoft really does have a strong inclusive design aspect. That's actually a note that they would take.
This particular thing, their line edits is tough. Is tough on the eyes.
Yeah, I believe that. They have all the arrows.
Yeah, it's a lot of dotted lines and arrows. Like the line edits for Google Docs is actually a little bit more accessible than that. I mean, it's a tough thing to solve overall, but yeah, by and large, you're right. Microsoft has a lot more accessibility settings usually, but this is just one particular area that just doesn't quite track.
I've talked about how my husband's boss is extremely weird several times, but one thing that cracks me up is they have a bit where Luis will be like, do you know how to do like this function in Excel? And he's like, yes. And then Luis watches him type into ChatGPT, how do you execute this function in Excel? He's just like, I'm sitting right here.
Now we can do it within Excel itself. Like, that's the beauty of the Copilot. Yes, there we go.
Another organization that we put on the list, and I love this inclusion. I think it's really cool, but it's maybe not something you typically think of as the most innovative company, is the United Auto Workers, the union.
Because it's not a company?
Pretty much. Tell me about that. I mean, Sean Fain's been in the news a ton this year.
Yeah, Sean Fain, I mean, literally elected president of the United Auto Workers. Oh, I'm going to forget the date, but like spring 2023, right?
Yeah.
And in a, unprecedented way, like people did not think that, because he, overcame the incumbents. And suddenly, like, he's leading them into a strike in the fall. And the reason, and a very effective strike, the contracts that they got from the big three automakers were really groundbreaking. What was super interesting to us was the way he executed this strike was very different than the way UAW and a lot of unions work. Usually they sort of say exactly when and where they're striking. Sean kept them on their toes the entire time. Like, literally would sit in a room, try to get something from the executives. They would say no. He would, from their own boardroom or conference room, call and and make just one plant go on strike. And, the automakers couldn't predict what was coming. It really kept them on their toes and forced them to the table in a way that, and to concede to different things in a way that the United Auto Workers never had been able to get from the automakers before. In addition to that, like, he's not done, right? Now he's got the big three and these contracts, and now he's set his sights on all of the international automakers who have plants here in the US, and also the ununionized companies like Tesla, namely. Mm-hmm. So that's always a fun matchup to see Elon go up against somebody.
Cage match.
And he uses this really, there's sort of this like old school sensibility. And he was talking about getting unions across different sectors to all get their contracts to expire on the same day in the same year so that he could set up the possibility of a general strike in the US. These are very like old school union ideas that he's bringing to the fore, in addition to being, very dynamic and innovative in the way he's striking and the strategy he's pursuing. So UAW, you got to hand it to them, even if you are on the side of the automakers. What they executed this past year was really innovative, and from the outside, exciting to watch.
I feel like the people listening to this podcast are not on the side of the big three automakers. I don't think that's our target demographic.
You don't know. The National Women's Soccer League is also on the list. We published a pretty big feature on them a couple of years ago now. Well, at least we published one on Angel City, which was a specific team within the NWSL. But what have they done this year that's put them on the list?
Women's sports are obviously having a huge moment, and women's professional leagues are really coming into their own. I'll have to say, like, I was looking closely at WNBA, and they've also done some really interesting things. But National Women's Soccer League, I think, is just moving the needle for women's sports in such a profound way. First, they expanded. They sold 2 expansion teams last year for $53 million apiece to different investment groups. Previously, the price to invest and to get the expansion rights for a National Women's Soccer League team were somewhere between like $5 to $10 million. They just like raised the bar, or the floor price for what you can consider a National Women's Soccer League by that much in a single year. They also renegotiated their broadcast contract to $250 million across 4 years, with 40 times the number of games that used to be broadcast in primetime are now going to be broadcast on primetime. They just sort of elevated the league into a new place in the course of just a single year. And I think their playbook is really interesting as well, because unlike WNBA, they're not tied to MLS, to a men's league, right? They are a very independent organization. So they really are, they can't rely on men's leagues to kind of help them with traffic, help them sell through sponsors and negotiate their broadcast deals. That gives them blank space so they can really set out and try new things. It also means they don't have kind of that like safety blanket over them. And the fact that they're, making such gains without that safety blanket, I think is really exciting to watch. I do feel like, and my son, who's a huge Premier League watcher, will probably quibble with me on this one, but he's not going to listen anyway because he doesn't pay attention to my job. But I think there's a real opportunity here as well for women's soccer in the U.S. Obviously, the women's national team had a disappointing year last year at the World Cup, but still, so many of the national team players play in the National Women's Soccer League that there is this sort of strong fan base. People watch the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, and then they go to these games and see these players sort of right in front of them. But also because the play here is so high and because there are so many world-class players on the U.S. women's team, you can't say that for the men's team. I'm sorry. Like, Christian Pulisic is good, but like there's not, an entire like stable of real world-class players on the men's team. That you have an opportunity here in the U.S. to have the National Women's Soccer League be the league that draws the best of Europe and the best of South America and Latin America to play here in the U.S. year-round. There is a lot of international talent in the National Women's Soccer League. There's still a lot playing in Europe, and I think as it grows in prominence, as those teams become more valuable and the broadcast deals are better and the sponsorship deals are better, you're going to see more global talent coming to play here. So maybe the National Women's Soccer League could be like the Premier League for women's soccer. Like it could be the destination, the must-watch, TV of women's soccer, which would be really thrilling. That's, maybe a decade or 2 or 3 longer off. You have to build those rabid fandoms and obviously the chants that go along with them. But I think there's a possibility there, and that's exciting to think about.
It's interesting too, with like the kind of analogous between like the men's sports and women's sports professional leagues at this point, where we look at like where the like women's soccer league is and where the WNBA is in comparison. If you look back in like the 60s and 70s and 80s, the NBA in particular was not a very popular league. Like we think about the NBA now, like it is now, where it's like the second most popular sport in the US, but like it takes a while to build this. I think we're 25 years in with the WNBA. The Women's Professional Soccer League is a little behind that as well. If you compare it to the trajectories of some of the early men's sports leagues, it's on a similar trajectory. So like it makes sense that like the expansion franchises are growing. The number of teams is going to continue growing. And then like the talent pool, especially in soccer, like you said, it just has such like an open field, not to use a pun, to like gain the best entertainers, because that's part of what it is. And then nobody's watching men's and the MLS. Nobody cares about men's US soccer.
They care about Miami. That's it.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that's because they have, but they've done, how many times have they done this? Like Beckham can't come to the MLS, and it's like it has a splash for a while and then it goes away because the quality of competition's never going to be as high as the EPL or the Spanish league or Germany or wherever. It's like way down there. So there's just so much audience acquisition you can do, particularly for women's soccer.
I think you're right, Josh, and it takes a while to develop these leagues, but the difference between the NBA and WNBA is that the WNBA is coming into its own in the era of social media. So
yeah.
So these players can develop, personal fandoms. And now we have, and this is especially applicable, I think, to the WNBA, but we are in the era of NIL. So like college athletes have outsized followings as well and we're going to see the first generation of NIL athletes entering the WNBA in the next few years. It's going to be,
she's going into the draft. That's going to be huge. Angel Reese is going to end up there. Those are probably the 2 biggest stars outside of like Sabrina Ionesco, Sue Bird.
So I want to talk about some of the, maybe this is not the right way to put it, but the randomer picks on this list.
The perfectly deserving but notably random picks on the list.
But notably random picks. So the first one I want to talk about is Sol de Janeiro, which is a body care company that I know is very popular with tweens, including yours, and which fell victim to a really funny Reddit rumor earlier this year when people thought that the body cream attracted wolf spiders. I presume that's not why it's on the list, but tell us what they did that, merited inclusion.
Well, yes, I know you've been spending some time on
I have, yeah.
Sickly sweet body spray beat. Sol de Janeiro it's just fascinating. It really, it didn't invent, but it really popularized this body spray category, right? Like it's not perfume. It's something that you can layer on, and God knows a tween loves to layer things on. They do not know moderation, right? So it's got to be a body spray. It's a more accessible price point, right? So it can appeal to people who have more money to spend, but also to a younger generation that's maybe saving up their allowance week by week to spend it on a new body spray and a new scent. And then they started dropping in the last couple of years these body scents, like their hype beast sneakers. They go off on social media. Everybody wants the scent, and it's been fascinating to watch. So they've really stuck by their profile and what they're pursuing, which is this very approachable, sickly sweet to some, but also just like adorable to others, like scents, that sort of conjure beaches and coconuts and stuff like that. And then they've really appealed to Gen Z and alpha consumers in a way that's just very smart. So I think anybody that's sort of looking, being in the skincare, and makeup space should be looking at Sol de Janeiro and the way they've courted this rising generation of Gen Alpha. We make fun of these Sephora tweens, but
I know.
They've got money and they're going to keep getting money, and they are very interested in these products. And Sol de Janeiro has really found a way to appeal to them. So
is Sephora tweens like an actual thing? Is that?
Josh, do you live under a rock? They're everywhere. Like if you go into a Sephora, it's just like hordes of tweens trying all the testers, like sticking their hands and everything.
Oh, I did not know this was a thing. I've only been in a Sephora once in the last 10 years.
I think we need a field trip.
Yeah, I'm fine. I will go on a social. I finally went to a Costco. I thought about making content out of that.
Costco's amazing, though.
I just need experience, just exposing me to different cultural elements. That's a new video series.
The other one I want to talk about is chess.com, which I know David Salazar, friend of the pod, championed a lot. Why chess.com now?
Why chess.com now? It's true. I mean, chess.com kind of took off in sort of that Queen's Gambit moment when everybody got excited about chess again. But the thing is, it has kept growing, and it's being very smart. So chess.com is, for people that don't know, an online destination that has playable chess boards so you can play against friends. They also create bots that mimic the play of some grandmasters, tennis pros who love chess. Even they had a bot called Mittens the cat, which people started playing with and then realized that this cat was the best chess player ever, and losing to Mittens the cat. So that went viral. But then they've also, and this is what we really were looking at, they brought into their orbit all of these chess influencers and players online who are on Twitch and streaming chess broadcasts and chess-related content or commenting on the chess scandals of the day. And there have been quite a few of them in the last couple of years.
That little Indian kid who courted controversy. Remember that last year?
There's always the cheating.
There's always a child. There's always a child who's cheating somewhere.
Scrupulous children, unethical children.
Yeah.
These sociopaths.
This entire MIC list is just an homage to unethical children.
Sephora tweens and cheating chess players.
But so they're creating kind of this exciting content around chess. And they've become not just the place where you go to play chess, but also kind of the cultural hub for chess. And then Endeavor, which is the big media, sports, entertainment conglomerate, just invested in chess.com, just a minority investment in chess.com, because now they want to start working with the company to create some unscripted content around chess, because it's more than just obviously Queen's Gambit, which is a great, high budget show, but there's a lot of stories to be told around chess and the drama and dynamics of chess. And all those stories right now are happening on chess.com.
I want a Dungeons and Dragons movie-esque version of chess where the characters are just pawns and stuff like that. I feel
they could call it Checkmate.
They could call it Checkmate. If you did it with the right amount of comedy and self-awareness. Barbie, for example. Those type of movies have done pretty well recently and have been pretty good. A high concept chess movie.
No, I want a Squid Game style show where there's real people moving on the chessboard.
And you get smashed if
exactly.
you get it.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's just wizards chess from Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah, that is
That's right.
Harry
I was
Potter.
where have I seen this before?
The one I want to end on is the 4-day work week. It's one of Fast Company's favorite topics. I actually don't understand how we've been able to milk that idea for so long.
I think it's mostly due to Morgan Clendaniel. He seems to be really a friend of the pod, Morgan.
I would put this in the category of like sci-fi ideas that finally are reality. Like I remember when we first started writing about 4-day work week, and I'm like, that sounds nice for like people in Australia who already have like a
we're like Scandinavian people. Yeah.
For Italians in August, like
Yeah.
like that doesn't work here. But this organization, and in fairness, it did grow out of New Zealand. It was founded as a nonprofit in New Zealand by a guy who started a 4-day work week at his company, and it worked so well that he started proselytizing about this and creating tools and like handbooks and helping other organizations and also governments around the world think about how they could implement 4-day work weeks. Last year alone, 4-day work week onboarded 196 different organizations across the globe to 4-day work weeks. It has partnerships in studies running in countries around the world. Again, as I said, it's working with governments and big and small companies. It's also been very good at publishing studies that show how much happier employees are that are, doing 4-day work weeks, and also how productive they are, sometimes more productive during the 4-day work weeks. So they've taken this idea, and with an assist from COVID and sort of all the conversations around how do we help with burnout and with productivity and remote work and all of that sort of stuff, they definitely got it's weird to call it an assist, but an assist from COVID. Mm-hmm. But this idea,
I was gonna call it out a little bit, like high five COVID.
Listen, Zoom got the assist. Like there's a lot of companies got it. Moderna, high five COVID. It's popularized now, and it's one of those things where it seemed like a very sort of out there conversation to have at your organization. Could we do this in just 4 days? And now I think people are having those kinds of conversations, and it's not inappropriate to bring them up. So go ahead, Yaz, at the next union meeting. Pitch it.
I don't feel like having a job anymore.
Just not on Fridays.
I also love that we're having this conversation the week of South by, where we're working Saturday and Sunday and not getting compensated extra for it at all.
Picture the conversations over 100 years ago when people might have been like, instead of 4-day work week, that'll never happen. They were going to be like, what? A 5-day work week and children can't work in factories? I'll never see it happen.
Yeah, but they didn't have computers. People couldn't reach them at a certain point.
It's here. The 4-day work week is here.
Not for us, but it is here.
The 8-day work week is arriving this week, yes.
We're going to take a quick break, followed by a conversation between Fast Company Senior Staff Editor Jeff Beer and Taco Bell CEO Sean Tresvant and CMO Taylor Montgomery.
First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos. But it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Sean, Taylor, thank you so much for joining us here on the Most Innovative Companies podcast. It's a pleasure to have Taco Bell on the cover of this year's issue. One thing that kind of became a theme or kept coming up in our conversations when I was reporting this story was how both of you talked about Taco Bell's brand ambition. It's got a very strong brand, but the way you guys talked about it was super interesting to me in terms of going from a really great fast food or QSR, quick service restaurant brand to a great global brand. Sean, how about I start with you?
First of all, Jeff, it's great seeing you again. I would say it starts with our brand mission. About a year ago, 2 years ago, the brand team did some amazing work on what is Taco Bell's brand plan. The first part of that brand plan was the brand mission, and our brand mission is to inspire and enable the world to live Moss. That's pretty lofty, it's active, it's inspiring, and we feel like it's unique to Taco Bell. So if our mission is to inspire and enable the world to live Moss, we look at it not only as we want to do that, not only as a QSR brand. We've been around 62 years. We're a pretty confident bunch. We want to be a great brand within QSR, but we also just want to be a great Big B brand. And we feel like we are as good as brand as some of the other best brands out there. And that's really our compass and our North Star moving forward, is that we want to inspire and enable the world to love Moss, and we want to do that by being a great brand.
When you think about like those great brands that come to mind, we think great global brands. I know we talk about like in the same breath as like an Apple, a Netflix, a Nike. These kinds of brands kind of want to be synonymous with that kind of strength, right?
Yep. All those ones you mentioned have one thing in common, and they have incredible relationship with consumers. All those brands, to be a great brand, mentioned in those breaths, you have to have an incredible relationship with consumers, and we feel we have an incredible relationship with consumers around the world.
Taylor, what do you think? What's that jump mean to you?
I'm going to build on what Sean said, because I do think it starts with the consumer. And Jeff, it's great to see you, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for having Sean and I on the podcast. You opened the question with, hey, we see the brand as something bigger than a branding QSR. And I think it actually starts with that and getting really clear. And Sean and I talk about this a lot. What is our relationship with consumers? And as a brand, what type of brand are we? And it's in the brand plan. It is where our muse is. But at the end of the day, Jeff, I think we are a rebel brand. I know. And I think that is our relationship with consumers. And I think what is the relationship that rebel brands have with consumers and rebels in general is you inspire consumers to be more fearless. You inspire consumers to be more rebellious. And I think when you think about when Glenn started the brand 62 years ago, it was a little act of rebellion to get a taco or a burrito in a burger world. And I think that was the foundation of our roots as being a rebel brand. And I think what our responsibility is, and I think, the role that we play in the world is to continue to take that rebel spirit, not just in the US, and expand that outside and around the globe. And I think that's what people need. It's why everybody loves rebels, is because they inspire people to be the most fearless versions of themselves. If we can lean into that, and that's really true to who we are and how the brand was founded, I think the limits for the brand don't exist, honestly. I think we can push it and take it to more places than it's ever been, both domestically and internationally too.
You talk about it as a rebel brand, which you certainly see in the way it's Mexican-inspired cuisine, the way you guys mess with your menu, the way you guys, speaking of fan experience, the audience consumer experience, get them involved. One thing also that popped out was this: how you see the customer, not through maybe a traditional marketing kind of demographics, but more like a psychographics or an attitude. And this idea of a cultural rebel being like, if you think about that prototypical taco customer, when did that come into play, and what's its impact been?
Sean, I think you should take that one. But I do remember us cooking up those two words in the lobby of the Marriott about 3 years ago, if you remember that.
Taylor mentioned it. Taco Bell has always been a brand who has attracted people who want a little something different, little something, we'll call it left of center or right of center. People who want to zig when others are zagging. And so probably about 2 years ago, as we're creating this brand plan we talked about who our consumer was. And I think any great brand needs to know who they're speaking to. And it's kind of always been there, but we crystallized it to the idea of we want to speak to the cultural rebel. Now, we're going to sell to everybody, but who we're going to speak to is this cultural rebel. And the cultural rebel, to your point, Jeff, is a muse, and it's a little bit of a psychographic. It's the ones that are tastemakers, game changers, changing the game, pushing culture forward. And it really helped, I believe, our marketing communications, our marketing messages, is that it was pretty clear who we're speaking to, and it allowed us to get sharper in everything we do from a marketing and branding standpoint, and even a menu standpoint for that matter.
And it's also aspirational. So I think to Sean's point, when we said, hey, who is our muse? When we said, hey, it's the cultural rebel, I think the first part is the brand is also, Taco Bell is also a culture. So it's our muse and who we speak to, but we also hold ourselves to that same standard of being a cultural rebel and behaving that way. And I think the other part is, we sell to almost 70% of the country comes to Taco Bell at least once a year. And rebels are aspirational for a reason. So I think there's a lot of beauty in those two words, both for how we walk as a brand, the fact that we're a cultural rebel, and it's aspirational for everybody.
The idea of rebelliousness, of something different, but also serving everybody. It's funny you say that, because I was thinking about, well, what kind of piece of work or brand expression, for lack of a better term, it illustrates that I can think of. And one that pops right away is the Taco Tuesday work. How for you guys does that illustrate some of the broader themes you guys have just been touching on? I'll start with you, Taylor, on this one.
I think it starts with a belief. And when we came up with Cultural Rebel, Sean pushed us all to think about, well, if you're a cultural rebel, well, what are the things that cultural rebels believe in? What are the principles of that? And one of the big ones is actions over words. Rebels don't talk about it. They have to be about it, and they have to take action to do it. And so the foundation for Taco Tuesday was, what is an action? Not saying, hey, we're a brand that believes that everybody that makes, sells, and celebrates taco should celebrate Taco Tuesday. But what is an action that's actually giving something back to a community that's bigger than that was the brief. And when we started to think about it, we said, well, hey, what's something that everybody who makes, sells, and celebrates taco should have access to? Is Taco Tuesday. So I think that was kind of the impetus of that idea, is what is a really bold action where we could give something back to everybody else in culture that sells tacos.
Nice. Sean, what about you?
Taylor is spot on. And as you can imagine, when you're sitting in a room and somebody says, we should liberate Taco Tuesday, the expression on people's faces, is it even legally possible? Can we do this? But this is why I love this brand, and this is why we are on the path to be one of the best brands in the world, because not many brands would go out and try to liberate something that's been trademarked for a number of years. But this brand did, and this brand got, legal and franchisees and Yum all around the rallying cry of liberating Taco Tuesday, not for Taco Bell, but for the people, because to your point, that's what rebels do.
It's funny because I think about creative teams avoiding calls from legal as opposed to calling them. So it was interesting how you got various levels of the company involved.
Well, legal team, if you're listening, Julie and the legal team, if you were listening, Jeff were probably the biggest rebels in this whole campaign, and we wouldn't have been able to pull that off without them. So shout to the Taco Bell legal team.
Shout to legal. How many times have you heard marketing shout legal out? That's just groundbreaking right now.
Yeah. I wanted to come back because we were talking about making that jump to a great global brand. I did want to touch on, Sean, the fact that you came to Taco Bell in 2021 after 16 years with Nike and Jordan Brand, your last post being a CMO of Jordan Brand there. What was the most, there's not a lot of maybe parallels between, at least immediately top of mind between sneakers and sports apparel and Crunch Wraps.
Yeah.
What's the most significant lesson or experience there now that you've been at Taco Bell for a while that has helped guide you there at Taco Bell, but also inform your answer to that first question about making that jump from great QSR brand to great global brand?
I think the one thing Nike was really great at is understanding their consumer, understanding how to create a relationship with their consumer. And coming here, the team is amazing, but it was just reframing transactions and relationships. We want a lot of transactions. We are a for-profit business that want to sell a lot of Crunch Wraps, burritos, quesadillas, but we also want to create lifelong relationships with our consumers. And great brands, I mentioned this earlier, I think great brands do that. And while we're driving people into Taco Bell's or on their phone to buy Taco Bell, it's really, really important for us to create relationships with our consumer as well. You got to have both. And I say people don't only want to buy brands, they want to experience brands. And so the team has been great of giving people reasons to experience Taco Bell, whether it's voting on your favorite Taco Bell item of the past, whether it's doing something like Live Más Live, whether it's Taco Tuesday. We're letting people experience Taco Bell as well as buy Taco Bell.
Nice. Well, speaking of Live Más Live, for those who don't know, this is a big event that the brand put on in Vegas just before the Super Bowl. It was a live event, but it was also streamed on brand social and the website. And it was kind of, in my mind, the Taco Bell version of like Apple's developers conference or Disney's D23, or basically a hype event for all the stuff that was going to drop this coming year. And there was a live event, and then there was a big tasting after where everyone got to taste all the new stuff, like Cantina chicken menu, cheesy chicken crispinata, cheesy street chalupas. I mean, The one that stuck out for me was the Baja Blast pie, which was
That stuck out for everybody, Jeff.
I know this is an audio format, but let's just picture teal pie, guys. It was fantastic. And then Taylor had the big Steve Jobs "one more thing" moment with the Cheez-It Crunch Wrap reveal, which is a big Cheez-It cracker 16 times the size of a normal one, kind of anchoring this Crunch Wrap, which I think if this is Taco Bell's developers conference, this was kind of the Vision Pro of late night drive-through. You both separately, when I was talking to you guys for this story, told me a little bit about how the idea for Live Mass Live came about. And now that I've got you together, I'd love you to just sort of get into that a little bit. How did the idea for this kind of super weird, wacky event for Taco Bell come about?
Let me start so we can get the true version of the story before Taylor goes. It's a really, really funny story, Jeff. It was Taylor, myself, and a guy named Tim in a car going to LA to meet Maverick Carter, shout to Mav, to talk about Taco Tuesday. So we were driving down from Irvine to Los Angeles, talking about how we wanted LeBron to be part of Taco Tuesday. So we're going to meet, Maverick and his crew. So that was the scene, is we're riding in a car. And I'll give all the credit to Taylor, is that we're riding in the car and we're talking about just big brand stuff and stuff that's disruptive and stuff that nobody else would do because we're always pushing the envelope. And Taylor said, what if we did like at the Super Bowl something like an Appers Developers Conference where we just unveiled the menu? And I think Tim and I just went, whoa, that's big, and we should do that. Again, all credit to Taylor, because it's easy to have a big idea, but to get from idea to real life at the Super Bowl where we're actually doing it takes a lot of, we'll call it gymnastics to get through the Taco Bell system. And we did it. But it came from a meeting going to talk about another disruptive thing, Taco Tuesday, where it all came about.
Was Developers Conference kind of happening in around those days?
It happened about like 2 or 3 weeks before. Sean, that is a very true story. You got that right. I would say this though, Jeff. I mean, it took pretty much the whole Taco Bell village and then some to pull this off, to make Live Moss Live one of our biggest brand moments that we've done over the past 2 years, getting close, if not surpassing, some of the stuff we did on Taco Tuesday. So a shout out to everybody that worked on it. I actually watched Apple's WWDC. I watch it every year. Sean has always been pushing us to say, okay, hey, it's actions over words. So if we're going to do an action, what is the action going to be? Can't just talk about it. We got to be about it. What is it? And I was watching it and I was like, you know what? I think that we are the most innovative brand in the world. I humbly do believe that. And so that's where the dots started to connect, Jeff, which is like, well, okay, if we believe that, well, we can't just say it. We can't just create a film about it. Like, we got to do something about it. And then it kind of got us thinking, it got me thinking on, but why are we the most innovative brand in the world? It's not just what we do, it's who we do it for. And we have the best fans in the world that love the brand more than Sean and I ever will. And we love the brand a lot. And so I think when you put those two things together, that's where the idea of Live Moss was built. How do we create an action that shows that we are the most innovative brand in the world because we're doing it for the people that matter most, our fans. And we're giving them something that they've always wanted.
I know in the audience there was you guys had the administrator for the Reddit that sort of leaks new Taco Bell products traditionally.
Reddit Blake.
Yeah, and all kinds of other fans. What's been the reaction so far of lining everything up and telling everyone what's to come?
If I'm honest, Jeff, and like this is the humble part, we had no idea if people were going to watch it, if people were going to like it, what the reaction was going to be. And I just think it speaks to the strength of our fans. I mean, there's like 500,000 people that have watched the whole thing. I think there was over 200,000 people that watched it live. And the reaction in social has been absolutely incredible. And it's reached pockets of culture that love the brand, but we didn't know. I'll give my favorite example is Kai Lenny. Kai, if you're listening, shout to you, all the Kai Lenny fans out there. Kai is a huge Taco Bell fan, eats bean burritos before every major surf competition that he does. Big wave surfing, by the way. And we didn't ask him to do it, but he brought a videographer and videoed his whole journey at Live Moss Live. The fact that we gave him a bell icon award. And Surfer Magazine did like a whole write-up on the whole thing, which I think is incredible. So I think that's just one example of we did what we set out to do, which was create a moment that was for and inspired by our fans and let our fans take the brand to places that we never thought it could go. There are TikToks out there that have 10 million organic views on it, reaction videos to Live Moss Live, which is incredible.
I'll give you my favorite story is, you never know, you build a tent and if you build it, they will come. And Taylor's point, I think I'm still blown away about, hey, we invited our fans. We knew some of the brand family like Devontae Adams would be there. But when you have people just showing up that you had no idea were going to show up, like Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill just showed up because he heard about it. You know, Tim, who runs Influence, did you invite? No, I didn't invite Tyreek Hill. He just heard about it and wanted to come. Maybe he's there just because it's a lazy Friday in Vegas. But then you talk to Tyreek Hill, and he's a huge Baja Blast fan. And he wanted the pie. He wanted everything Baja Blast related. And it just goes to what Taylor was talking about, the fandom of this brand. Tyreek could have been anywhere, but he chose to come to our event because he's such a fan. And that's always a bit humbling when you think about it.
And the cheetah was vibing during Armani White's set. The cheetah was vibing.
Nice. Well, listen, the teal pie was vibing. The Baja Blast pie was huge. I myself was the salt and straw ice cream taco collaboration.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes out for that, everybody. Listen, this has been great. Guys, thanks so much for your time here. Thanks for being on the podcast. And yeah, thanks for opening the Talk About door to Fast Company. For everyone listening, please check out my Talk About story for more detail about all this stuff that Sean and Taylor are getting into and more in the new Most Innovative Companies issue.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Fast Company. It's been great.
Thank you, Jeff and Fast Company family. It's been fun.
Okay, we are back with Amy, and it's time to wrap up the show with Keeping Tabs. This is where each of us shares a story, trend, or company we're following right now. And Amy, since you're our guest, what are you keeping tabs on?
Well, since I just edited MIC, I'm going to talk about an MIC company. But I don't. Have you played with Perplexity? Do you know Perplexity, the answer engine?
No, I have.
It keeps coming up at editorial meetings, and I just have refused to learn what it is.
As journalists, you must, and because this thing is coming for us, guys. I'm telling you. I did go into Perplexity the other day and asked Perplexity, what the most innovative companies were in travel, and Perplexity was like, here they are, and it was literally our last list of the most innovative companies.
Well,
in
did
travel.
they just search the internet?
Well, so Perplexity is an answer engine. It's not a chatbot, it's an answer engine. So it is very good at answering your questions. It's very up to date, unlike ChatGPT, and it has citations very prominently. So you can see exactly what sources it's using. And it uses a finite number of sources. It looks for trusted sources, Fast Company among them. So that is flattering to some degree until you realize it's taking our jobs eventually. Yeah. But right now it's flattering. And it will tell you where it drew that information from. And then it also will give you different questions that you may want to ask it that could sort of refine the information or lead you down another path in your research. So it's really good at that. And I think that's really interesting. You should play with it. But also now Perplexity sends me a newsletter where it will say, here's the latest you need to know about Elon Musk suing OpenAI, over this turn from nonprofit status. And it will summarize sort of the news of the day. And at the end, it will tell me the 4 news articles that it, pulled that information from. But, its brief is enough.
So it's basically doing what we do at the beginning of this show.
No, Josh, wait till I get to the last thing.
But we have charisma.
Then last night I got an email from it and was like, would you like to listen to the Perplexity podcast where it digests...
Oh yeah, you sent us this too.
It digests the news of the day and using voices from 11 Labs, which is a generative AI for voice company, will read these news stories. So basically... Perplexity is fascinating. It's an incredible company. It's an incredible product. It scares the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm keeping tabs on. White-knuckled tabs on.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Josh, what are you keeping tabs on?
I'm keeping tabs on the content studio unions negotiation with Spotify. So that's the Parcast, Gimlet, and The Ringer unions. Those are the podcast companies that were acquired by Spotify over the last few years. And the main sticking point, speaking about Perplexity and their podcast, is Spotify is pushing to basically use voice models of their hosts and talent to translate their podcasts into different languages to distribute to a wider network, notably to, I think, Spanish-speaking countries where podcast listenership is the fastest growing in terms of South and Central American countries is where the most podcast listenership is growing. So it makes sense why they would want to do that. The unions want to draw a hard line in using those AI models in terms of basically on the grounds of name, image, and likeness claims of that. And this is a real sticking point. Now, we're recording this a couple weeks before it airs, so I don't have maybe the latest of what's happening in those union negotiations, but it's part and parcel with, what we saw over the summer with WGA and the writers' strike versus the Hollywood studios. It's WGA East is negotiating this, so really they're at the vanguard of these conversations between creatives' jobs and rights to their own voice and style. And it's interesting. And I mean, the podcast industry is really interesting with this. I've gone to a lot of different industry events talking about AI voice models, and some has been like hand wringing, but then there's a lot of people like bragging about like, I host a podcast with an AI sidekick on my post. So yes, you could replace me.
All you need to do is upload the Daily Mail's consciousness to like ChatGPT.
I do actually, and this is maybe like teasing for a future episode, I do want to do something around this a little bit really more fun. And figure it out with our podcast to dive into this story a little bit more, because I'm fascinated by it. Perplexity is wrapped in all of this voice models, and this is just a conversation that's not going away in our industry. Maybe a little navel-gazy, but it's important. Yaz, what are you keeping tabs on? Lighten the mood, please.
Guys, what is going on at Queer Eye?
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
I've been hearing.
Well, wait. Before we get into it, give us some context, because the context I have, the interior decorator one,
Bobby Burke,
left the show in somewhat of a shady way, and there were rumors that he was feuding with the fashion one, Tan France. Then, yesterday or this morning, I'm not totally sure, Rolling Stone published an expose about the toxic environment around the show and said that Jonathan Van Ness has a rage problem and was abusive to people on set.
Oh.
And this is very interesting to me, because it comes at a time when his hair care line, JVN Hair Care, is part of a group called Amorous that went bankrupt recently, and his hair care brand is up for sale. And I can't help but feel, this is conspiracy brain, I know I sound like someone else in the office, but this is a very well-timed article.
Smear campaign?
To screw up this sale. Now, it also may be true. Like, that's not me saying it's not true, but it's kind of crazy. They all seemed friendly, and they're not
really
at all.
Hurts. This really hurts.
It does hurt. I do talk a little bit to some people around like the entertainment industry, just like kind of on background. And this is kind of like an Ellen DeGeneres situation, where like JVN, a lot of people have been like, yeah, JVN comes off in a certain way on camera, but behind the scenes, it's like kind of been like a little bit of an open secret in the entertainment industry for a little bit. And then the whole thing with like Bobby Burke is that like none of them really get along is like the point, like not, or like maybe a couple of them here and there, which is fine. You don't have to be best friends. You can just play them on camera. But like Bobby Burke left because he was kind of fed up with the contract situation, and Tan France was trying to get Bobby Burke replaced. And then their contracts were up for renewal, and Bobby decided not to renew because he thought everyone was not going to renew. And then so he left, and then like, I don't know, Anthony and Karamo are just kind of over there chilling around.
Anthony has a failed restaurant in the West Village. His business prospects gone down. Karamo, I believe, is like...
He has a talk show.
Yeah, so he has a talk show that's doing well. He's popular in certain platforms. But the Queer Eye scandal is super interesting to me because of the business aspect of all this, where I'm just like, these people's personas were like everything. They have so many business extensions, and I'm just kind of interested to see where this goes.
Particularly Jonathan Van Ness. I mean, they were the breakout star of the show and had really been capitalizing off of that in a very real way.
I mean, we did a photo spread of them.
Yeah, like they've been around. I know Tan France has done some stuff with us before. They've done a lot of stuff. I mean, there was an interesting, it was going around on TikTok something a while ago about basically like one of them was going around at parties like shit talking Jonathan Van Ness and was like, everyone was kind of upset. Like there was a very like competitive atmosphere of like who was going to be the breakout star of it. And so then there was like a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's interesting. It's I don't know. It's not terribly surprising.
When you get to the bottom of it, just let me know if I need to unfollow Jonathan on Instagram. That's all I need to know.
I'll send you the Rolling Stone expose.
Yes, it's like, what's the most important business news of the day?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Anyway, we'll see how the story develops. But that's it for Most Innovative Companies. Amy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, and thank you for all of your work behind the scenes on Most Innovative Companies. Yes.
And where can we pick up the latest issue?
You can order the magazine. You can subscribe online. Go to fastcompany.com for more details. We'll also put links to how you can get the issue and everything that's in digital in the show notes.
Our show is produced by Avery Miles and Blake Odom, mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres, and our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Remember again to subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.